You are listening to the Wealth Formula Podcast with Buck Joffrey. Get ready to change your life.
Welcome, everybody. This is Buck Joffrey with the Wealth Formula Podcast coming to you from, Montecito, California. It's still here. Actually, I'm just back into the place. We had evacuation here, and, if you're on Twitter or in the news, whatever, you probably saw Ellen DeGeneres out there. She doesn't live too far away from me, so it was kind of crazy. We all got evacuated, and it's probably because there was a big mudslide about 5 years ago that killed some people and really demolished, a ton of real estate around here. And they were afraid the same thing was happening, except this time we didn't have a bunch of debris from a fire that rolled down the hill with boulders. But thanks for those of you who actually reached out. A lot of you reached out and asked how I was doing, and I do appreciate that. But we're all doing good. We're all back. Evacuation's over. No damage to the house, which is really nice too. Anyway, before we begin, I just also want to point out that there is an opportunity to participate more in Wealth Formula via our website, wealthformula.com. Also, if you are interested, you can consider joining Wealth Formula Network, which is our inside community, our online community. And we do bi-weekly Zoom calls. We have a Facebook page. Anyway, lots of fun. People in it. It's just a pretty tight community actually right now, so it's pretty cool. Check that out at wealthformularoadmap.com. That is different from the Investor Club, by the way. Investor Club is not a community per se. It's just, getting onboarded as an accredited investor and getting access to deal flow. And that is simple and easy. You can go to wealthformula.com for that. Now, as for today, we're going to talk a little bit about discomfort and risk and all that kind of stuff. Now, I know what you're thinking. I mean, if you read a lot of business and entrepreneurial books, you are probably sick of people telling you that you have to get out of your comfort zone, take some risks. I get it. It's kind of beaten over the head in general, right? But let me ask you this, Tim, if you're honest, what are you doing to take risks and to get uncomfortable? Well, after all, why should you do it anyway? Well, it's really, in my opinion, really the only way to grow, to get better, to, take it to the next level or whatever you want to call it. These concepts apply really to everything. And, all you have to do is think about all the things you didn't do in life, but would like to, those types of things that just eluded you over the years. And you're like, I wish I learned how to do that, but I never did. And that's the type of thing that I feel like can improve the quality of our life significantly if you can address those kinds of things. So after all, what's the purpose of all this wealth we're trying to build in this podcast, in our group, and our whole ethos? It's the purpose of wealth is to have the freedom to focus on some level of self-actualization. It's not to play golf. It's to give you an opportunity to live your life, try to, fill in all of the things that you haven't done, your bucket list, whatever you want to call it. And if you need an example of this, I'll give you one of mine. So I might have talked about this years ago on the podcast, but I'll tell you the story again. I never learned to swim as a kid. And I remember my older brother and sister going to swim lessons. I remember I was really little, and I would go in there with my mom, and I just have vague memories of my brother and sister who were 5 and 4 years older than me, in the swimming pool. And I remember being put into the baby pool a few times, and that was cool. And then they tried to do some basic lessons, and I was just terrified of water. And it was probably, I was probably 4, 5, maybe 4 years old or something like that. So anyway, they didn't really push it, and I was pretty little anyway. A couple years later, it was really my turn to learn to swim, to take those swim lessons that my brother and sister were doing, but I declined. I had some fear. I had some something that just wouldn't let me do it, and I begged for mercy in this regard. And unfortunately, my parents didn't push back. And sometimes it's a lesson for parents too, right? Like it's a lesson for us as parents to not to do some of the things that our parents did. My parents were, he doesn't need to swim. What does he need to swim for? So they didn't care. They let me off the hook. And unfortunately, that's not a great thing, in life. I mean, especially when you're an athletic kid and, you want to go to the beach and all that stuff. So as an adult, I tried private lessons a bunch of times. I'm in my 20s and my 30s and my 40s. And I wasn't at all afraid of water anymore. In fact, I probably should have been more afraid of water than I was at that point. However, I just couldn't figure out how to move in the water, right? Like it just was like flailing, having some kind of seizure or something like that in the water, but it wasn't getting me anywhere. And I'd given up altogether, after all those private lessons until about 5-6 years ago when I heard Tim Ferriss, the 5-hour work week guy, that guy, talking about having a similar experience as an adult who couldn't get swimming down. And it was something that he'd been trying. And he also had multiple trainers. I'm sure he was like, much more intense about it than I am, because that's his whole ethos is, right? Like his intensity and all that. But he, despite all of his efforts, could not learn to swim until he met a guy by the name of Terry Laughlin. And Terry was the creator of a type of swim school and technique called total immersion, or TI. So Tim had said on his show, I think it was on his show, or I don't know, maybe I read it, but he said that Terry got him swimming laps, like easy got him swimming laps by the end of the week. So I had to give it a try. So I reached out to Terry, who lived in upstate New York. And as it turned out, he had end-stage cancer and really hadn't been doing lessons for some time. However, I got lucky. He just finished chemo and was feeling a bit better, so he invited me out anyway. So a few weeks later, or maybe I might have only been like a week or two later, I was at Terry's house on the East Coast in his training pool, the same way that Tim Ferriss learned. Now, the way Terry taught me was remarkably easy and methodical. And believe it or not, by the end of the day, I was swimming. I mean, it was just mind-boggling for me that I was swimming at the end of the day. After decades and decades of frustration, multiple lessons, no one could tell me what to do. And Terry just broke it down into a couple things, and he got this, 40-plus-year-old guy swimming in a day. Anyway, I was swimming. I stuck around for another day, but had to get back to work. I figured I'd come back in a few months to get down one part, though, that I really hadn't got down yet, which was breathing. I couldn't breathe while I was swimming, so of course that makes it so you can't really do laps and that kind of thing per se, but I can just swim and not drown and move and stuff, but I can't, I couldn't swim for exercise. Now I wish I'd stayed in New York for that week because Terry passed away just a couple months later, unfortunately. So now I can swim again, but not long enough to do laps for exercise. I still can't breathe. I tried another TI instructor, another guy who was sort of in his in that same training methodology, but it really wasn't the same. Terry was the master. He was just really, really good at teaching people to swim. Anyway, yeah, I mean, it makes me think while I'm sitting here that maybe I should try to find another TI person, try to get him to help me learn to breathe or something like that. But the point of this story is to illustrate this idea of getting uncomfortable, to get over a lifetime full of anxiety and self-consciousness about being unable to swim. I mean, all I had to do was find the right instructor, fly out there. Was that a risk for me? Not really. It was uncomfortable for me to be in the pool there at the beginning, not knowing how to swim, but I kind of gave in to it. And well, next thing you know, I was swimming by the end of the day. You could probably apply this kind of story to your own life. I mean, what have you been avoiding for the last few decades? It might be swimming. Who knows? Is it time to confront these things and move forward on with your life? I mean, you'd probably feel better, right? And if it's something you need to do that is physical, Well, you're not getting any younger either, I can guarantee you that. So anyway, my guest this week on Wealth Formula Podcast, he has a unique take on risk and discomfort, and actually suggests that we should constantly be seeking discomfort in our lives. And we will hear all about that after these messages. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today, my guest on Wealth Formula Podcast is Sterling Hawkins. Sterling is an author, speaker, and an entrepreneur. He is the author of Hunting Discomfort, How to Get Breakthrough Results in Life and Business No Matter What. Sterling, welcome to Wealth Formula Podcast.
No matter what. Thanks for having me on, Buck. Great
no matter what. That's the key words, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So,
so
words
you have that'll unlock growth for all of us.
There you go. So you have an interesting story. When we start there, because, obviously this push into discomfort and no matter what and all that came from somewhere. So tell us how you got to this point.
It did. Well, a lot of people come to me, especially when they see the book called Hunting Discomfort, and they're like, you got to look at my business, my relationships, my bank account. I don't need to hunt discomfort, Sterling. I'm surrounded by it.
Or they say, guess what? I already found it. Found it. There you go.
Yeah. And my answer is always the same, which is you're not hunting discomfort. You're living with it and probably rationalizing why you have it. And that's really where my journey started. This is early 2000s. I'm right out of college. I start a company with my dad, and we sell it to a group in Silicon Valley and become part of this huge behemoth that was like the Apple Pay before Apple Pay.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And everybody, especially investors, looked at this thing and said, oh, yeah, biometrics is the future. We raised $550 million US cash, multi-billion dollar valuation. And I was very much in a space of who needs discomfort? I've got this whole business and life thing figured out. It's just a matter of time till I crown myself the next Steve Jobs,
Right.
Yeah. And things went really well for a while. Not only did we grow to 700 people and offices all over the world, but then there were things. Have you seen The Wolf of Wall Street?
Yeah.
It was like a scene out of that movie, like models in the office, parties at the Four Seasons, first class, private flights. I won't get into more details than that, but you get the idea, right?
Sounds fun.
It was a blast. It was unreal. And remember, I'm in my early 20s. So I'm like, I'm living the dream.
Yeah, totally.
And, through a series of missteps, which we can get into if you like, the housing market collapse comes and our investment dried up. We couldn't raise any more money, and we didn't have enough organic growth to sustain the size that we were. And very long, very dramatic story short, the entire thing goes bankrupt. $500 million cash just gone.
Yeah.
I think we licensed some of the patents or sold some of the patents, from, a couple of $1 million, like nothing compared to what we had raised.
Right.
And it was really then where I made a conscious decision to some degree of avoiding discomfort, which is a mistake I think many of us made, where I didn't admit that it was a huge failure. It was all over the news and everybody saw it, but I pretended like I was okay. My millionaire friends would invite me on trips, and for a while I'd just keep going, spending money I didn't have because I didn't have any income anymore. And then I started to just tell people I was busy. I retreated from going to any of those things, expensive dinners, big trips, any of these things they were doing, because I didn't have the cash, but I didn't tell them that.
Right.
And I avoided and hid from discomfort for so long, I ended up playing out this kind of sad country song of a story where I go from a penthouse apartment to my parents' house in my early 30s now. So it's not a good look in your 30s,
right?
At least if you're forced to go there.
Right.
And even my girlfriend broke up with me. It's like I'm hitting every single beat of this thing. And it was in that really dark time. I make a little bit light of it now, but
sure.
Easily the darkest time of my life, hardest time of my life, that I really stared face to face with the abyss, the depths of discomfort of everything. And it was from there, from that rock bottom, that I, instead of running from discomfort, started to use it to build myself back.
So what is, tell me how that works. I could get a sense of it, but tell me how you use the discomfort to start building yourself.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is coming to terms with what is exactly how it is, right? So I called people up and I said, listen, I don't have anything. In fact, I'm in 6 figures of debt right now. Like I need help. Not only can I not go on your fancy vacation, I don't have money to pay for dinner, right?
Right.
And it wasn't easy. It was uncomfortable, but that at least gave me some footing to continue moving ahead. And some people were offering help in different areas. And all of a sudden I started to build a community of people there where I wasn't trying to like keep up a facade, but people started to pitch in to help and say, oh, well, I know this person, or I know that person, or here's some options, or do you need a loan? Like those kinds of things. People were offering help once I went through the discomfort of admitting that I needed it.
Yeah.
And have you ever heard that quote, the way out is through, Buck?
Which one?
The way out is through.
The way out is through. No, I have not.
It's a Robert Frost quote. My mom used to say it when I was a kid growing up, and it came back to me. And it was kind of in that abyss, that rock bottom. I just say, you know what? I'm going to test this thing out. Like if the way out is through, let's see. And to me, it means go through the uncomfortable, the uncertain, the things that are embarrassing, or you experience shame, or you have a lot of fear. Like go through those things, and what you're finding, what you want to find, is on the other side. And so that's really what I started doing. Everywhere I could, I started to find places physically, mentally, emotionally, where I could kind of push the edges of myself. And it was from gripping onto those edges, I was able to, build myself back, like I say.
So when you think about discomfort now, how do you determine, I guess, you brought up earlier when somebody says, I've got plenty of discomfort. How does one determine what type of discomfort is impeding them, and, which is potentially something they need to confront and in order to help themselves or to move ahead?
So it's a good question. And I think the first thing to understand is that discomfort is all the same from a mental, physical standpoint. Research is actually out of University of Michigan, and they were studying discomfort, scanning people's brains and their bodies as they went through different kinds. Physical discomfort, like somebody stubbed their toe. Emotional discomfort, maybe somebody lost their job, or an investment went south, or they lost a job, broke up with a loved one. And what they found is no matter what kind of discomfort somebody was going through, physical, mental, emotional, the brain and body processed it almost identically. Now, maybe you know this because you're a doctor. I didn't know this, but so much so you can take acetaminophen and it will help you with emotional pain.
I didn't know about that. I should start cracking that bottle.
Right. Well, all the disclaimers go with that, right? I'm not a doctor. That's not a biohack. I don't suggest you do that.
Right.
But what I do suggest is that we could take the next step, which is if how we experience discomfort is the same anywhere, we can grow our capacity to deal with it everywhere. Everybody knows if you want to build your biceps, you go to the gym. Well, if you want to build your resiliency, your courage, your breakthrough results, you start hunting discomfort. There's just no other way. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you hunt discomfort?
Well, there's 2 aspects to it. And I think about my mom being right. Like the way out is through. We just need to have the courage to go through no matter what. And that's really the point of the book, right? The steps to go through that discomfort. And I'll offer you 2 components of it here. The first thing is meet that discomfort everywhere that you can. If it's a difficult kind of conversation with a particular person, go after it. Start to notice how you're being in those situations. How do you feel? Where's that feeling in your body?
So are you saying start with the things that you might be avoiding?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
So like, a conversation that you've been avoiding, or, something more practical, like, I really can't swim and I really need to learn to swim. Let's just go do this.
It could be that
thing. Like, right. So finding out what you're avoiding and stop avoiding it. Is that how you hunt?
That's a piece of it, and find it as much as you can. Like you said, if you're afraid of the water, get in the water as much as you possibly can.
Yeah.
Right. Piece one. The second piece is, once you do that, start to understand, well, where did that originate? Right. Nobody came out of the womb afraid to swim. Nobody came out of the womb afraid to have difficult conversations. Right. Like doctors, again, you would probably know, doctors aren't announcing to these newborn babies, hey, this one's scared to speak in public. Like it doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
Those fears, that discomfort started somewhere. And the more that you meet it, the more you can kind of trace back to some of those feelings to see, well, when did that start? What is that really about? And as you can get to the root of it, that's where you can dismantle it from the source and become free of it.
Right. Let's talk about, how is it more natural to think about failure rather than success?
Well, so biologically, it makes a lot of sense to deal with discomfort, right? Our ancestors, if they were feeling cold, they figured out how to get themselves warm. If they were feeling the discomfort of being hungry, they would go hunting or pick berries. If they were feeling scared, maybe they would, set up a new home or something, right? They were dealing with the source of discomfort. And what happens today is, modernity for many of us affords us a lot of luxuries, right? Like I can work on Zoom and through email. I can be entertained through Netflix sitting on the couch, and I can eat with Uber Eats delivering me food, right? So I no longer, from a survival standpoint, am I forced to deal with the source of the discomfort. I can run from it. I can turn away from it. And what that does is it leaves us forever dealing with its effects.
Right. When you, do you think to a certain degree, because you talk a little bit about modern living.
Yeah.
Is part of the idea that you have that we're kind of hardwired to have more discomfort, and not having that discomfort is somewhat disconcerting?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're hardwired to look for berries and hunt animals all day long, and we got Uber Eats and, it ends up being something that creates some tension within, ourselves.
I think so. I think it's almost like an overdose or even an addiction to comfort. And if you think about it from like a human level, I work with companies and company leadership to realize their potential, to realize greater potential. And just from a personal standpoint, if you're only using or willing to embrace half of your emotions, I only want to feel love, joy, and happiness, or whatever it is, you're actually denying a piece of yourself, pieces that you need to realize your full potential. And it could be anger, it could be grief, it could be embarrassment or shame. Those emotions are just as valid and just as necessary for all of us as human beings to live a fulfilled experience. And it just so happens that on the other side of those things are all the results we're looking for anyways, be it time better spent, more money, better relationships, you name it.
So when you've worked with people on this, or companies, kind of give me some idea, like if you can, examples of how maybe, dealing with or hunting discomfort, confronting it, provided an opportunity for growth.
Yeah. Well, there was a great example. It's in the book, and I was just writing about it recently. GE Healthcare. Mm-hmm. They were making a new electrocardiogram machine years back. I feel like this is especially appropriate given your audience, right? You know more about some of these things than I do.
Yeah, you would think.
But for anybody that's not a doctor and doesn't know what the ECG is it's a machine to basically look at your heart vibrations and see if there's something wrong with it, right? Did I get that right?
Yeah, it's just a rhythm, heart rhythm, make sure your heart rhythm's normal. And if there's something abnormal, then maybe you get worked up with another test and then another test.
Yeah. So these machines were typically very expensive to produce, and it was somewhat limited where they could get them. Mm-hmm. And the team at GE looked at it, and the typical approach would be, throw more money, more time, more resources at it, and we'll make a better machine. Well, maybe that's kind of the easy way, and you never guaranteed the result that way. You're not guaranteed a result, period. Mm-hmm. But they went the other way. They actually started to hunt discomfort themselves, and they say, well, instead of increasing the budget, let's decrease it, not by a little bit, but by 18 times. And instead of the 2-year development cycle that we usually have, let's cut that down to, I think it was 12 months or so. And the team, first of all, you got to acknowledge it's a little bit uncomfortable because they're looking at this saying, probably initially, that's impossible. How are we ever going to do that? Nothing's ever been done like this before. But once they started to turn towards that discomfort, acknowledge some of the shortfalls that they had regarding their resources, regarding their thinking, regarding themselves, they started to be able to take steps forward and lean into that discomfort. And well, those machines are much cheaper, much faster. Yeah. Now they're available all over the world. Mm-hmm. Not only did they achieve the result they were looking for, but in a retrospective they were doing, they said, they probably would not have achieved it without that discomfort, without those constraints. It's only because of those constraints that they had and leaning into the discomfort of them did that incredible breakthrough result arise.
How about in terms of a personal story, not necessarily you, but at an individual basis? Because this is information that, presumably is universal, not just for businesses, but can be used in your social life, health, and happiness, etc.
Exactly. Well, have you ever heard of William Hung? Does that ring a bell?
It does. I don't know where, though.
So you might know him from It's American Idol fame. He sang Ricky Martin's She Bangs so poorly, he became like a worldwide phenomenon, right?
Right.
Well, I had the opportunity to meet him as part of a TEDx I gave several years back and started talking with him and got a little bit of the behind the scenes story. Because same as you, I saw the memes, I laughed about it, I saw the recordings, right? And in talking with him, I didn't think about it from a human level, but he goes, Sterling, you have no idea what it's like to have the entire world laughing at you. Right? Mm-hmm. Like he thought he was a good singer. He was practiced, really, and then he gets up on that stage and the world says, no, you're not. Huh. And he said he just wanted to crawl into a hole. Like it was the worst feeling he had ever experienced in his entire life. Mm. And after some period of time doing this, he decided to not avoid that discomfort, but to really lean into it, to say, okay, I have been made a little bit of a caricature. How can I use that to my advantage? How can I lean into that discomfort? And so what he started doing is he started making appearances all around the world. It turns out people would pay him quite a bit of money and fly him around the globe to see his performance of Ricky Martin's She Bangs.
There you go.
And he ends up on stage in Vegas with Ricky Martin himself. He's got record deals. He's got celebrity deals. He's got endorsements. Like all of a sudden, the thing that he was most uncomfortable with became the reason for his success. It just took leaning into that discomfort, huge amounts of discomfort to be able to do it.
You talk a little bit about it's important to give up the exception to get the results you want. What does that mean?
I think when we give ourselves an out, just from a biological standpoint, a psychological standpoint, we're probably going to take it, right? When you create a safety net, when you already see like, oh, if this goes south, here's how I'm going to handle it, right? If this investment goes bad, here's how I'm going to tell my husband or my wife. Here's what I'm going to do with my portfolio thereafter, right? If you're creating an exit strategy before you've even started something, you're probably going to default to that just because it's easier, it's known, and you created some neural networks in your brain that are going to start to orient you towards that path. Mm-hmm. When you get rid of the exception, you get rid of the excuses, you get rid of the reasons in advance, it's going to make it much more likely for you to achieve whatever it is that you're looking to do. So with companies and with leaders of the companies, and something that we can all take from is when you start on a new initiative or you have a new goal, before you just set out and taking actions, sit for a couple of minutes and write down all the ways you're going to give yourself an excuse. Write down your exit plan. Write down why you're going to fail if you fail. And once you write them down, set them aside and say, I'm not going to let myself use any of these excuses going forward. And that orients you more towards the goal. And especially if you're having somebody holding you accountable to not using those excuses, you're much more likely to achieve them. Makes
sense. Tell us a little bit about the book, where we can get it. I mean, what are your, obviously it's about this concept of hunting discomfort. It is. You can get it at the usual outlets, I assume, Amazon and all that.
I like to say anywhere great books are sold.
Yeah. Is it on Audible?
It's not on Audible yet. It will be later this year.
Okay.
But it's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, local bookstores.
Are you going to read it on Audible?
I am going to read it.
Good. I like it so much better when authors read their books. It just doesn't seem right when they don't. But and then you've also got I know some tools that people can work at home as part of sort of this, idea of discomfort. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, this goes a little bit back to your earlier question of how do we find the discomfort that's in the way? And one is start to notice it, right?
Yeah.
But we've constructed our lives and by extension, our businesses to avoid discomfort because it just doesn't feel very good. So from a very young age, we start turning away from it, maybe initially consciously, but we forget over time what that discomfort is that we're avoiding. So we do have to do a little bit of sleuthing to figure out what that is. So we put together a hunting discomfort quiz. Doesn't cost anything. People can go to huntingdiscomfort.com and take that free quiz there, but it's 15 questions. And at the end of it, it's going to at least shed a little bit of light on what discomfort is in the way of you using the tools, the resources, the money that you already have. And better yet, a pathway to how you can break free of it. So, that's something anybody can do. Of course, the book gets a lot deeper into some of that stuff and a lot of the things we've been talking here, but you can find all of it at huntingdiscomfort.com.
Sounds good. And then you also have a website, sterlinghawkins.com. What can we find there?
That's right. Yeah. Well, thanks for the opportunity to plug all my things here. So at sterlinghawkins.com, you can find all my social media. You can find the work we do with companies in terms of workshops, keynote speaking, the deeper work we do around aligning companies to a true mission, a true no matter what. And any questions you want to get in touch with me, all of that's there.
Oh, fantastic. Sterling, thank you very much for being on Wealth Formula Podcast. Very useful information and hopefully people get some benefit from reading the book and exploring the questionnaire and stuff.
For sure. Thanks for having me on, Buck. It's been a pleasure.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it. And before we go, I do want to remind you that there is this thing that a number of you may be interested in called Wealth Formula Network. Wealth Formula Network is our inside community, our insider community, where we do bi-weekly Zoom video calls. We have a Facebook page that we do some discussions on. When you sign up for a course. And effectively what happens is it gives you the basics of personal finance. And then that also gives you membership into Wealth Formula Network. Check that out at wealthformularoadmap.com. Anyway, that's it for me this week on Wealth Formula Podcast. This is Buck Joffrey signing off.
Thank you for listening to the Wealth Formula Podcast. Visit us on the web at wealthformula.com. The information contained in this podcast are opinions, not fact. As always,